Hi, I'm Henry, a beginner artist from Finland, and I would like to share my thoughts on the things you should take into consideration being a beginner artist. And who knows, you might even profit from these tips. At least I hope you will. As I mentioned earlier, I myself am a somewhat of a beginner artist. I have little background in creating art both traditionally and digitally, but there is still much room for growth. Disclaimer: I'm not qualified to talk about the more in-depth things in art since I have little to no experience on the field compared to professionals. To name a few, Cynic's Design was my personal favorite, Modern Day James and Jake Parker. I will link all of these channels in the description below. But still, there is some advice that I thought could help many beginner artists to get things going, as I rarely see any beginner artists showing their view on the art world. So these tips are purely the things that have worked for me and for some of the people I know. Tip number one: first and foremost, make art with the right kind of mindset. Now don't get me wrong here, I do encourage to draw as much as possible, even though you might feel a little discomfort. After all, consistency is key. What I mean is that you should only create art when you're physically and mentally capable of doing so. You would think that this tip is the simplest of all, but unfortunately, I see a lot of artists fall into this category, me included. You might have had an awful night's rest last night. Take a nap or sleep better the next night and draw the next day. If you're having a lot of stress about schoolwork or time consumption in general, go figure them out and then start drawing with those things out of your mind. What I've found is that when your concentration is focused somewhere else other than in art, you don't really profit from the experience. All you get is a bad mood, and you might even add it to the list of the things you're stressing about. And of course, you won't progress in art. That's not what you want. In my opinion, you need to have at least 75% of the focus on the task to get positive results from practicing art or anything for that matter. If I would summarize this tip into one sentence, it would sound something close to this. Don't create art because you have to. Do it because you want to. The other thing I find to be hard in being a beginner artist is realistic goals. You might have heard this one from your teacher before, but it's really important when it comes to being motivated to create art. If you set your goals too high, you might get discouraged and unmotivated to continue creating art. This happens often when artists watch art made by other artists and think, that's really well drawn. Heck, I might even try doing something like that myself. Then proceeding to draw something that's way out of your skill zone and not getting the wanted results. There's nothing wrong in getting inspired and motivated by others' artwork, but comparing you, who has drawn for let's say 2 years out of your life, quite inconsistently, whenever you felt like it, to an artist who has drawn, painted, sculpted, and done all that for a whole 10 years consistently is just flat out dumb. You'll just end up feeling sad and pathetic. Getting good or even decent at art takes a lot of practice and consistency. Jake Parker has a video called the 10,000 minute rule that explains this problem with progress more in depth. More on that on the second tip. Tip number 2: join challenges and competitions and publish them. Do the Inktober Art Challenge, for example, and through that learn to stay in a routine, accept critique, and give feedback. Forming a solid but working routine in anything will make your progress a lot faster, and so does getting feedback from other artists and truly listening to them. There's often a lot of mistakes you might miss out on while you're creating art, even if they could be as simple as a missing finger or something more abstract like the interpretation of your piece. To put it plainly, getting feedback tells you how your art is viewed by other people, and I think that's a pretty good indicator of the appealingness of your piece. I'm not telling you to feel terrible after you've heard some critique, even if it might be harsh to a certain extent. Everyone sees art differently, and there's always going to be someone who doesn't like your artwork. What you should do, though, is to listen. Listen to the critique and then look at your art from the view of the person who gave you feedback. And I really mean it. Think about the feedback, especially if it's negative, and look at your art with newfound eyes. It could be just some random guy who just doesn't like your artwork for no apparent reason. And then you can just forget about it. If this isn't the case though, you might find the feedback to be reasonable after a while. And then you could just transfer this newly learned knowledge to your next art piece. And that's really what defines learning, in my opinion. I'm not going to talk about getting into a good routine that much, because I view it to be quite self-explanatory. And I, myself, am missing just that, a working solid routine for making art. But what I should know is that, just like in the tip number 1, you should set your goals relative to your life situation. If you're going to school every day, working on the weekends, and then wanting to have time with your friends and possibly other free time activities, you just can't create art every day for countless hours. What you can do though is drawing whenever you have just a moment to chill or do something not that useful, and to look at others' art. That's so easy you can do it even while at school or at work. Follow artists, and when you find an art piece that you like, think to yourself, what makes this exact piece so appealing? Then figure out just how was that appealing feature created. Once you've made a routine of observing art in your spare time, that will automatically transfer to your progress of making art. I'm not implying that you will become the next Picasso just by looking at art and not actually creating it, but keeping even the thought of art in your mind throughout your daily routine will help you to think as an artist does. Tip number 3. I already went through the problems of being too obsessed with an artist who's on a greater skill level than you, but I left one thing out. You should still study your favorite artist's art style, composition, and the emotion or other feelings you might experience from their piece, and then try to implement them on your own work. I see so many beginner artists just really obsessed with creating an art style of their own, but they don't really know how they can create it. Well, I shouldn't use the word create, because your art style is never something that you created out of thin air. It's really just a mishmash of the art that you have already had an influence of, including your favorite artists and art pieces. So my tip for molding your own art style is to study your favorite artists, art pieces, and other artwork. Like I told you in the second tip, you should watch the pieces closely, examining them, and finding out how and why they are your favorite pieces. Is it the color variations, value changes, or composition, for example? It can even be as simple as the medium or the technique they're using. Just try to figure out what makes their piece unique and appealing. Once you've done that, it's time to find some art that you absolutely hate and despise. I'm certain that you have come across some art that has just made you want to look away in horror of its wrongly implemented value changes or anatomy. Then you should do the opposite of what I told you to do with the great pieces. This time focusing on the elements that make this certain piece ugly or wrong in your opinion. When you're creating art the next time, you'll automatically spot the mistakes or elements that will make your art feel unappealing. That's the real goal you should be heading towards, at least in my opinion. Making your art as appealing as you possibly can. Like I disclaimed at the start of this video, I'm not a professional artist whatsoever. These are just my own observations and opinions. These tips might work on somebody if done correctly and might not work for the others. I just thought that these were important subjects to think and talk about. I sincerely hope that this video helped you to understand some aspects of being a beginner artist. If not that, then I hope this video raised even a few questions on the matter at hand. If so, feel free to ask me directly from my Instagram direct messages, this video's comment section, or the Reddit post I posted this on. All of the links will be in the description below. Thank you for watching.